I am joined now by Christopher Harris. He is the executive director of Unhyphenated America. He's also a Republican. I'm also here with David Mitchell. He is a lawyer and the author of a new book out called We Hold These Truths, and he is a Democrat. And David, I want to start with you. Before the election, you wrote about how America actually needs Donald Trump. Why did you say that, and how are you feeling now?
You know, I think that in America, what we've seen in the Democratic Party in particular is a failure to meet the most pressing requirements and demands of African Americans. They come around every 4 years, they talk big, they promise big, and they deliver small. And I think what we've seen in this country is that we don't really make big change until our backs are totally against the wall. Our grandparents' generation did that. We saw in the Civil Rights Movement. Big change didn't come until we saw African Americans being mowed down on the streets, being beat into within inches of their lives. And so I think that we needed this wake-up call, not just for African Americans, but for Americans, more generally, who are frustrated with a Washington that really seems focused on inside baseball and not really responding to the biggest needs of Americans.
So, Chris, I see you sort of nodding in agreement with some of the things that David has said. How are you feeling about this Trump presidency? This is clearly a victory for you.
Well, it's a victory overall. I mean, I'm not a Donald Trump supporter. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative who tends to vote Republican primarily because at this point in time, the Republican Party tends to line up more with my values and views. But to talk on what David was speaking about, what you have is inside baseball. Most people in America are looking and saying, what's really going on in D.C.? I get phone calls from family and friends, and they're saying, well, what's going on? And I tell them, I don't know. I live in a bubble. You know, if you live here in Washington, D.C., you're in a bubble. You see prosperity here in the D.C., but I do travel outside of the area all the time, and I go to North Carolina, I'm in Pennsylvania, I'm all over the country on a regular basis, and I see vacancies, and I see all the problems that are going on that people here don't really see. You know, we see, our home value dropped a little bit, but people still have jobs. There's no jobs out there when 96 million people or more are out of work, and so I think to ask us what's going on is probably not the right question, and we're not the right people to be asking that question because we live in this insulated bubble.
Well, speaking of this insulated bubble, this is something that Donald Trump said that, he wanted to basically blow up. He wanted to change what has been going on historically in Washington. But we're already sort of seeing a shift in what he said he wanted to do and what's actually happening. And I'm specifically talking about him beating this drum of anti-corruption as he was going through the campaign cycle. But, he's filling his transition team with some of the very people, Washington insiders, lobbyists, that he said that he didn't want to be part of this ballgame. So, Chris, I'm wondering to you, how much is this a sign that he won't live up to some of the promises that he has made?
It's not a surprise at all. I mean, there are plenty of those of us who are conservatives who there was a war basically on the right, whether the Trump supporters and never Trump supporters. I wasn't necessarily a never Trump supporter, but I looked at him very warily, just because I'm like, he's never expressed anything that lines up with what conservatives believe. And he's never been a conservative. So none of this is surprising at all to me. Those of us who celebrated at his election, we did so because it was a slap in the face to the liberal media, who basically were constantly telling everybody, oh, he can't win, and oh, Hillary's a shoo-in. And we're like, okay, you don't know about the majority of the country, or at least a good portion of the country, who don't want the Clintons. And we all understood that Hillary Clinton was corrupt to the core, and she wasn't a great candidate. That the fact that she even got as many votes as she did, it was because she was carried, dragged, propped up to the finish line by the media.
And if I could jump in here, I think what we saw with Donald Trump is just a very skilled businessman and marketer. He saw a void in the market. He saw a product that needed to be provided. He created it. He packaged it. And then most brilliantly, he found somebody else to pay for the marketing, i.e. the media. Yeah. So, the question of whether he'll come back a little bit on his promises, I don't think it's a question. I think he did what he had to do to get elected.
The art of the deal.
That's right. That's right. The guy told you who he was, what he's about, and then he went out and did it. I think he surprised a lot of folks, but it really speaks to the frustration amongst Americans right now.
So that goes to this issue, too, of really who Donald Trump is. You know, is he this hardcore Republican conservative? Is he something that's slightly different? And, you know, I'm thinking of some of the policies that he's talked about wanting to upend. Trade, the Affordable Care Act. He's not planning now on ripping up the Iran deal, something that he railed against. What do you, David, make of what could potentially be seen as his softening stance as he enters the White House?
Well, I think there's a difference between running for president and being president. We heard that from Barack Obama and others. He now has to govern. And so the idea that he's going to rip up NAFTA, I mean, it sounds good. We have businesses and you have farmers who are relying on channels that have been in place for a long time because of NAFTA. The other thing is, are you going to go to Mexico and say, okay, we're ripping up NAFTA, and by the way, you're going to build a wall? I mean, the politics become a little bit more complicated when you're actually having to make these deals. I think you're going to see him pull back on a lot of things, not just the Affordable Care Act. I think he's not going to actually try to rip up NAFTA. You know, TPP kind of basically died yesterday, I think, with Mitch McConnell saying that we're not going to consider it. So he's now in a different reality. Right? He was kind of living in the Donald Trump virtual reality. Now he's in kind of the Washington reality, and it's about making deals. So I think he'll be effective, right? I think it's important for Democrats now. I know, speaking with a lot of friends, they're kind of in shock and they're angry. And I tell them, we've got to now give Donald Trump an opportunity to make good on his promises. He's made a lot, right? He said that he's going to invest in African American communities. He's going to you know, improve their lives, you know, create jobs. Let's see what he does, but let's hold him accountable too.
So, Chris, what do you make of where he's going to place those priorities? What does he need to do when he comes into office?
Well, as David was talking about, and I mentioned this Tuesday when you guys had me on Tuesday, that the voter turnout among African Americans was not going to be as high as people thought it was going to be, and those who did turn out to vote were not going to be as hardcore Hillary as people thought. And a lot of that had to come down to economic issues in those battleground states like Michigan and Ohio and all those places he was not supposed to win. Well, there's large percentages of African Americans and other minorities who are in those lower income brackets, who are working the type of jobs where those industries have gone away. And if he wants to have their support, help bring those jobs back. And he has to go that route. I mean, if you want, it was economics. At the end of the day, people voted with their pocketbook because they knew that Hillary Clinton was going to be a continuation of all the things that did not work for 8 years under Obama. Nothing got better for African Americans or other minorities during the past 8 years under Obama.
Let me jump in. I don't think it's accurate to say that nothing got better for African Americans, right? And I'll agree with you. You know, if you look at things like foreclosure rates, those numbers are disproportionately high for African Americans. You look at the loss of wealth, disproportionately high among African Americans. But, you know, at the end of the day, we had a black president. Yes. And I don't think you can discount the meaning of that, right? Looking forward in generations, there will be children who have only known African American president, right, in their lives when they got to vote next time around. So, I mean, I think if you look at the long-term kind of consequences of a Barack Obama presidency, there will be lots of good. Now, I do think that we kind of dropped the ball in a lot of things. In my book, I talk about that. Really, I think my book is kind of an articulation of how we got to now. And I think it's been not just Barack Obama, right? There's also been a failure on the part of the Democratic Party establishment.
That's certainly been a criticism.
Right, and also the people who make up the party, and particularly African Americans, I'm going to be honest, to hold this president accountable.
Gentlemen, it has been an enlightening discussion. We're going to have to leave it there. David, Chris, thank you so much for joining me.